Imagine this. You wake up one morning, the sunlight streaming through your window, the world outside humming with its usual rhythm. You stretch, yawn, and begin your day like any other. But as you move through the motions, brushing your teeth, sipping coffee, scrolling through your phone, a strange thought creeps in. It's subtle at first, like a faint whisper in the back of your mind. Then it grows louder, more insistent until it's impossible to ignore. What if everything you think you know about yourself is a lie? You pause, the coffee cup halfway to your lips. The thought feels absurd, almost laughable. Of course you know yourself. You're the one living your life, making your decisions, feeling your emotions. But then another question emerges, sharper and more unsettling. If you can't trust your own mind, what can you trust? This isn't just a philosophical musing. It's a paradox that cuts to the core of human existence. Your mind is the lens through which you perceive reality, the narrator of your story, the architect of your identity. Yet, what if that lens is distorted? What if the narrator is unreliable? What if the architect is building on a foundation of illusions? Consider this. Every memory you hold, every belief you cherish, every decision you make, they all pass through the filter of your mind. But what if that filter is flawed? What if your thoughts are not your own, but a patchwork of biases, fears, and societal conditioning? What if the voice in your head isn't you, but a puppet master pulling strings you can't even see? The weight of this realization is staggering. It forces you to confront a terrifying possibility that the very thing you rely on to navigate the world, your mind, might be your greatest deceiver. And if that's true, how do you find truth? How do you know what's real? This is the great question, the one that lingers in the shadows of your consciousness, waiting to be answered. But before we can unravel it, we must first understand the hidden forces at play, the psychological and philosophical roots of this profound deception. The journey begins here, in the quiet unease of a morning like any other, where the familiar suddenly feels foreign, and the ground beneath your feet begins to shift. The unsettling truth is this: your mind is not a neutral observer of reality. It is a storyteller, a meaning maker, and at times a masterful liar. This isn't a flaw or a failure. It's the very nature of how the human brain evolved. To survive, our ancestors needed to make sense of a chaotic world, to predict danger, to find patterns where none might exist. But this survival mechanism comes at a cost. The stories your mind tells you are often incomplete, distorted, or outright false. Consider the work of Carl Jung, who explored the concept of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress, deny, or project onto others. Jung argued that the mind is not a unified entity, but a battleground of conflicting forces, many of which operate beneath the surface of conscious awareness. What you think of as you is merely the tip of the iceberg, with vast, unseen depths shaping your thoughts, desires, and fears. Friedrich Nietzsche took this idea further, declaring that there are no facts, only interpretations. Your mind, he argued, is not a mirror reflecting reality, but a prism refracting it. Every belief, every memory, every perception is filtered through the lens of your subjective experience. And that lens is shaped by forces beyond your control. Your upbringing, your culture, your traumas, your desires. Even your sense of self, the I that feels so solid and real, is, according to Nietzsche, a fiction, a construct created to give coherence to the chaos of existence. Arthur Schopenhauer, too, saw the mind as a source of deception. He believed that our thoughts and desires are driven by an unconscious will, a blind, irrational force that compels us to act in ways we don't fully understand. We tell ourselves stories to justify our actions, to make sense of our choices. But these stories are often little more than rationalizations. The truth is, much of what you think and do is governed by forces you cannot see or control. And then there's the role of societal conditioning. Jean-Paul Sartre famously said, "We are our choices." But how free are those choices when they are shaped by the expectations, norms, and values of the world around you? From the moment you are born, you are bombarded with messages about who you should be, what you should want, how you should live. These messages seep into your subconscious, shaping your beliefs and desires until they feel like your own. But are they? Or are they simply the echoes of a culture that has colonized your mind? This is the hidden problem. Your mind is not a fortress of truth, but a labyrinth of illusions. It is shaped by evolutionary imperatives, unconscious forces, and societal pressures, all of which conspire to create a version of reality that feels real, but is, in fact, deeply subjective. And the consequences of this deception are profound, shaping not only your individual life, but the very fabric of society. But this is only the beginning. To truly understand the power of this hidden force, we must delve deeper into the unseen consequences of a mind that cannot be trusted and the silent ways it shapes your world. The journey into the labyrinth continues, and the stakes are higher than you might imagine. The deception of the mind is not a passive phenomenon. It actively shapes your reality, often in ways you don't even notice. Think of it like this. Your mind is a map maker, constantly sketching the terrain of your world. But what happens when the map is wrong? You might still navigate, still move forward, but you're wandering in circles, guided by a flawed understanding of where you are and where you're going. Take cognitive biases, for example. These are the mental shortcuts your brain uses to process information quickly, but they come at a cost. Confirmation bias leads you to seek out information that confirms what you already believe, while ignoring evidence that contradicts it. The sunk cost fallacy keeps you trapped in bad decisions because you've already invested too much to walk away. The halo effect makes you see someone as entirely good or bad based on a single trait. These biases aren't just quirks, they're systematic errors in your thinking, distorting your perception of reality and leading you astray. Then there's the role of memory, which is far less reliable than you might think. Studies have shown that memories are not static recordings, but dynamic reconstructions. Every time you recall an event, you're not replaying it, you're rewriting it, influenced by your current emotions, beliefs, and even the questions you're asked. This means your past is not a fixed truth, but a shifting narrative, constantly reshaped by the present. What does that say about the stories you tell yourself about who you are and where you've come from? But here's the twist. This very uncertainty can be the key to breaking free. Because once you recognize the illusions, once you see the cracks in the map, you can begin to redraw it. The journey out of the labyrinth starts with a single, radical realization that the mind is not a master to be obeyed, but a tool to be understood. And understanding it requires a rebellion, a deliberate, conscious effort to challenge the stories you've been told, both by yourself and by the world around you. The question is, are you ready to rebel? Are you ready to confront illusions, question narratives, and see the world and yourself with new eyes? The path ahead isn't easy, but it is necessary. The greatest deception is believing you have no choice. The moment you realize that, everything changes. Rebellion begins with a radical act, questioning everything. Not just your beliefs, values, and goals, but the small things. The thoughts that pass unnoticed, the emotions that rise and fall, the habits running on autopilot. This isn't easy. It requires courage, discipline, and the willingness to face discomfort. But breaking free from illusion is the only way forward. Start by observing your mind. This is the essence of mindfulness, a practice rooted in ancient wisdom and validated by science. Instead of identifying with your thoughts, step back and watch them as if they were passing clouds. Notice the patterns, biases, and recurring stories. Your mind constructs narratives. Are they true or just conditioned responses, fears, and desires? This observation is not passive, it's subversive. It exposes the tricks of the mind, revealing that the mind is not you. It is a tool, a mechanism, a collection of processes that can be understood and mastered. Next, challenge your assumptions. Take a belief you hold dearly and interrogate it. Why do you believe it? Where did it come from? What evidence supports or contradicts it? This process is uncomfortable but liberating, opening doors to new ways of thinking. History is filled with those who dared to rebel. Socrates questioned moral assumptions. Galileo defied the geocentric view, and Rosa Parks refused to accept segregation. They were ordinary people who chose to see reality clearly and act accordingly. Their rebellion was not just against external forces, but also against internalized beliefs. Your rebellion may not be dramatic, but it is just as vital. It starts with small acts, questioning anxious thoughts, resisting unhelpful habits, challenging limiting beliefs. Over time, these accumulate, forging a new way of thinking, one rooted in awareness, not illusion. This is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. The mind, like a river, will always flow, carrying debris of conditioning and bias. Your task is not to stop the river, but to build a filter, separating truth from falsehood. As you do, you reclaim control, not over the world, but over your perception of it. The journey is difficult, but it leads to freedom. The freedom to see clearly, choose wisely, and live authentically. This freedom is not something to find. It is something to create, moment by moment, thought by thought. But there is one final realization, one ultimate truth that makes all of this possible. It is the key that unlocks the door, the light that dispels the shadows, and it is waiting for you beyond the horizon of your current understanding. Here it is. You are not your mind. The thoughts, emotions, and stories within you are not your essence. They are fleeting, like waves on the surface of an ocean. Beneath them lies something deeper: awareness, presence, being. This realization is ancient, echoed by mystics, philosophers, and sages. The Buddha called it emptiness, the recognition that the self is an illusion. The Hindu tradition speaks of Atman, the true self. Existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre acknowledged that consciousness is distinct from self. Even modern neuroscience suggests the self is a construct, a narrative woven by the brain. But intellectual knowledge is not enough. The power of this truth lies in experiencing it. The shift from identifying with thoughts to resting in awareness is the moment of awakening. The realization that you are not the puppet of your mind, but the witness of it. Imagine standing on a mountaintop, looking down at a storm below. The storm is chaotic and violent, but you are not in it. You are above it, watching from a place of stillness. This is the relationship between you and your mind. The storm is your thoughts, emotions, and fears, but you are not the storm. You are the one who watches. This realization changes everything. You are not defined by your past, mistakes, fears, or desires. These are part of the storm, but they are not you. You are not trapped by your mind because you are not your mind. You are the space in which the mind exists, the awareness that gives it light. And the most profound part, this awareness is not something you need to create or attain. It is already here, always present. You don't need to fix or transcend your mind. Just recognize what you already are. This is ultimate freedom. Not freedom from suffering, fear, or doubt. Those are part of life. It is freedom from believing these things define you. It is the freedom to see clearly, to choose wisely, to live fully. Not because you have mastered your mind, but because you have seen through it. And so, the journey ends where it began, with you. Not the you that you think you are, but the you that is always here, always now, always aware. This is the truth that makes all other truths possible. It is the light that dispels shadows, the key that unlocks doors, the end of the labyrinth, and the beginning of everything. As you step back into the world, carry this truth with you. Let it guide you not as a belief, but as a living reality. Let it remind you in moments of doubt or fear that you are not your mind. You are the one who watches. You are the one who sees. You are the one who is free. And so the question remains, what will you do with this freedom? How will you live now that you know the truth? The answer is yours to discover, moment by moment, breath by breath. The journey is over, but the adventure is just beginning.